Have a look at this picture, taken with a smartphone at a normal end-of-year school party. The shadows cast by some of the playful costumes form the shapes of ambiguous landscapes and animals, dark fantasies in sharp contrast with a sunny day. Philosophy has shown us how being is said in many ways. It is the history of art that has told us of the ambiguity and power of images. Only the official version has come down to us. Centuries of Christian culture have tried to absorb, subjugate, and control the world. Creatio ex nihilo. Christian tradition has told us that we come from nothing. Symbolic forms and narratives were plundered from the great mythical past, and painters were paid and at times exploited to celebrate religion. So the question is, what information can be gleaned from paintings about the knowledge that this power has tried to conceal? Aby Warburg and Friedrich Wilhelm Nietzsche, the academic companions of Jacob Burckhardt, the author in 1860 of The Civilization of the Renaissance in Italy, were both considered mad and were locked up in a psychiatric clinic under the care of the Binswanger family. They shared the idea that knowledge is tragic, made of phantoms and never-ending returns, ideas deemed to be disturbing and inconvenient by silent culture, by the certain knowledge of the self-righteous. Through them we have inherited a system of knowledge based on investigation and comparison of sources, and it is thanks to this method that we have been able to decipher the otherwise indecipherable messages contained in many religious images. Images in which Christ and Dionysus are confused, and with memories taking us back to the cult of the witches' Sabbath and to the existence of the devil and of magic. These mystic cults expanded in the 16th century through the unwitting use by peasant communities of natural hallucinogens, such as the ergot of rye, which created mass psychedelic trips. Nighttime flights to the witches' Sabbath with Diana's phalanxes are episodes that St. Thomas described as fantasies of the soul, in Fantastico Anime, in an attempt to calm the growing alarm within the Church. And the Church took immediate corrective action through its violent inquisition, based on books on torture such as the Malleus Maleficarum, written in 1487 by the Dominican friars Jakob Sprenger and Heinrich Kramer. The book gives a name and taxonomy to the heresy that was rampant in Germany and in the rest of Europe. Its forceful repression led to thousands of deaths and terrible persecutions in the name of God. This was the world in which Antonio Allegri, called Correggio, born in 1489, took his first steps. It was, as Giulio Carlo Argan recalls, an Emilia dominated by the religious sentimentalism of Costa and Francia and by the hermetic teachings of Mantegna, whose clouds of vices and virtues paved the way for the corrupted anatomies of Correggio and for ambiguities between sacred and diabolic, celebration and orgy. Carlo Ginzburg shows how during the famous trial of Carla Signorini held in Modena in 1518, it was quite clear that, especially in rural areas, religious faith was often mixed up with the elements of superstition and on occasion even with reminiscences of pre-Christian cults. The Quaestio Distrigibus treatise by the theologian Bartolomeo da Pisa, known as Bartolomeo Spina, sheds light on witchcraft in Emilia. Having escaped a number of times from the plague, Correggio developed artistically in the intellectual circles of Mantua, at the court of Isabella d'Este. He later enjoyed the favor and protection of Giovanna da Piacenza, an abbess devoted to the forbidden cult of Diana. Correggio has been depicted as poor, unhappy, and famished. We certainly know of his serious divergences with the building council of Parma, an important organ of the Church, and indeed the last recorded payment dates from November 17, 1530. The amount he received was equivalent to 550 gold ducats, about half the agreed amount, and in any case proportionally less than the amount received by Parmigianino. His work on the dome of the Cathedral of Parma was considered inappropriate and he was halted, despite the intervention of Tizian himself. Correggio was dismissed from the work and from the cathedral, never to return. Serious disagreements also surrounded the work dedicated to Diana Herodias, which has never been completely deciphered, and which Marguerite Yourcenar referred to as a work in black. In the abbess' enigmatic room, it may be based on the works of Giordano Bruno, through those of Apuleius and Ovid. This is suggested by the figure of Actian, which was later to inspire Parmigianino. In Fontanellato, Parmigianino was working on his alchemic principles, under the protection of Count Galeazzo di Fontanellato, who was himself interested in Hermeticism, the Christian Kabbalah, and esotericism of Jewish inspiration, which the Church fought against in order to achieve a monopoly over the supernatural. What if the Madonna della Scodella did not actually intend to represent what we see in it? Is it just a coincidence that, unlike in other paintings of the rest on the flight into Egypt, the Virgin is wearing a yellow mantle? Or might this be linked to the public recantation of a woman? Inquisition documents mention a woman accused of witchcraft in Parma on December 17, 1508, who was later admitted back into the church but condemned to wear a yellow mantle over her shoulders. Similar cases are recorded in Piacenza and in the Modena area. Between 1520 and 1528, there were no fewer than 22 witchcraft trials in Modena alone. Research carried out in the Parma city archives by Luca Ceriotti and Federica D'Allasta show how the circulation of unorthodox messages was a significant phenomenon. The area was on the border between Spanish-governed northern Italy and the territories under the direct control of the Church, and it was also on the main vertical axis of road communication along the peninsula. This encouraged the circulation of the ideas of religious dissenters, which were being heard in peripheral regions from Spanish Lombardy to the Republic of Genoa, and from the state of the Gonzagas to the Tuscany of the Medici. During the trial of Carla Signorini, we see how the idea of a terrestrial peasant woman concealing diabolic hallucinations took shape in the popular imagination, as black as magic, as the hallucinatory journey of the witch's Sabbath, and as curiously nocturnal as the scene painted by Correggio. This is contrary to the practice of his predecessors, and it also calls into question the much debated apocryphal Gospel of Pseudo-Matthew, from which the scene is taken, but which talks of the hot sun in the desert. Here we see a dark scene with ambiguous vegetation, which more than palm dates recalls Datura stramonium, powerful hallucinogen, also known as devil's weed. The branches of the trees appear between two anthropomorphized clouds, resembling the act of defecation, as though wishing to poison the water that the angel on the left is pouring. This recalls the Church's habit of unjustly accusing lepers and Jews of spreading the plague. In the wake of the trial of bananas, in which it had been found, wrapped in an animal skin, a sculpture portraying a Jew or a Saracen defecating on the cross. The shift from pestilential vapor to the aerial journey of the Sabbath was accomplished. In his famous Levite, Vasari writes, simulating the night, friezes of lovely putti, and various fantasies of ancient sacrifices. Or, as Mengs recalls in the historic recollections of Correggio, angels passing from cloud to cloud, of which the uppermost stares at the viewer, as in the subsequent allegory of Vice. A floating, like in old Armenian sermons, in which the demons of the air were invoked, passing the newborn baby from hand to hand until the moment of death. Vice, as in Mantegna's clouds, or in the demon in Giotto's cloud in Assisi. Children's bodies were used to make ointments for magical practices and metamorphoses. The liquid was poured into a flask and given to initiates on Sunday to drink before the consecration of the holy water. Before their master, future disciples would repudiate Christ and the faith, baptism, and the Catholic Church. They would then pay homage to the Magisterulo, or Little Master, as members of the sect called the Devil. The modern document studied by Ginsburg shows us that in popular belief the devil appeared in the form of a boy or a child, and that all of nature had a diabolical and nocturnal side to it. as though traces of the devil could also be found in earthly things. This appears in the lower part of the painting, in which the shape of the soil appears to outline the demonic features we can see in a plasterwork by the Italian school made a few years previously. It is Mengs who focuses on the angel on the right-hand side, seen tying the donkey with such expressiveness and grace, possibly more than the situation warrants. It is Ginsberg, however, who points out how, in Alexandria in the 1st century BC, there were groups who worshipped the donkey's head and practiced ritual killings, followed by acts of cannibalism. But why should Correggio have gone so far? Because he had fallen out with the building council? Or as a revenge for being sent away from the cathedral? Or because of the freedom given to him by his secular commissioners? The answer might take us even farther. If we look closely at the donkey, we can see it has no bones and that it blends into the figure of Saint Joseph. It has the same color as his cloak, as though there had just been a metamorphosis from donkey into man. The roots of this go back to the distant past and to studies of Apuleius and the Golden Ass, which is considered to be the first book of magic and which was originally titled Metamorphosios. The opportunity came with the frescoes commissioned by Giovanna da Piacenza, which we have recalled in the scene with Actian, which was also worked on by Giordano Bruno, and inextricably bound to the cult of Diana. What if the Madonna della Scodella was in actual fact the end of Lucius' metamorphosis into a donkey, a metamorphosis taking place through the ointment? It is certain that the following day, in the apocryphal Gospel of Pseudo Matthew, the Holy Family go into the temple and see the effigies of the pagan gods smashed to the ground. The door onto the night appears to provide the frame for the painting, which was inexplicably made by Correggio himself, and yet it leads to a different destiny. Lucius, wearing a crown of palm leaves, and now, inside the temple of Isis, is initiated into the cult and the mysteries of the great goddess.